was nothing in that, but the men's faces puzzled me, for they seemed to do their job in a fever, longing to get it over, and yet in a sweat lest they should make some mistake. Their commonplace task seemed to be, for them, a matter of tremendous importance. I moved so as to get a view of their faces, and I saw that they were white and strained. The two were of the butler or valet class, both elderly, and I could have sworn that they were labouring under something like fear. I shuffled my feet to let them know of my presence, and remarked that it was a fine night. They started as if they had been robbing a corpse. One of them mumbled something in reply, but the other caught a package which was slipping, and in a tone of violent alarm, growled to his mate to be careful. I had a notion that they were handling explosives. I had no time to waste, so I pushed on. That night, in my room at Ludlow, I had the curiosity to look at my map and identify the place where I had seen the men. The village was St. Song, and it appeared that the gate I had stopped at belonged to a considerable demesne called Vaughan Castle. That was my first visit. At that time I was busy on a critical edition of Theocritus, for which I was making a new collation of the manuscripts. There was a variant of the Medician Codex in England, which nobody had seen since Gaisford, and after a good deal of trouble, I found that it was in the library of a man called Dubellay. I wrote to him at his London club, and to my surprise got a reply from Vaughan Castle Hall, Faxeter. It was an odd letter, for you could see that he longed to tell me to go to the devil, but couldn't quite reconcile it with his conscience. We exchanged several letters, and the upshot was that he gave me permission to examine his manuscript. He did not ask me to stay, but mentioned that there was a comfortable little inn in St. Song. My second visit began on the 27th of December, after I had been home for Christmas. We'd had a week of severe frost, and then it had thawed a little, but it remained bitterly cold, with leaden skies that threatened snow. I drove from Faxeter, and as we ascended the valley, I remember thinking that it was a curiously sad country. The hills were too low to be impressive, and their outlines were mostly blurred with woods, but the top showed clear, funny little knolls of grey bent that suggested a volcanic origin. It might have been one of those backgrounds you find in Italian primitives, with all the light and colour left out. When I got a glimpse of the Vaughan in the bleached meadows, it looked like the one water of the border ballads. The woods, too, had not the friendly bareness of English copses in winter-time. They remained dark and cloudy, as if they were hiding secrets. Before I reached St. Song, I decided that the landscape was not only sad, but ominous. I was fortunate in my inn. In the single street of one-storied cottages, it rose like a lighthouse, with a cheery glow from behind the red curtains of the bar parlour. The inside proved as good as the outside. I found a bedroom with a bright fire, and I dined in a wainscoted room full of preposterous old pictures of lanky hounds and hollow-backed horses. I had been rather depressed on my journey, but my spirits were raised by this comfort, and when the house produced a most respectable bottle of port, I had the landlord in to drink a glass. He was an ancient man who had been a gamekeeper, with a much younger wife who was responsible for the management. I was curious to hear something about the owner of my manuscript, but I got little from the landlord. He had been with the old squire, and had never served the present one. I heard of Dubellay's in plenty, the landlord-master who had hunted his own hounds for 40 years, the major, his brother, who had fallen at Abu Clay, Parson Jack, who had had the living till he died, and of all kinds of collaterals. The Dubellays had been a high-spirited, open-handed stock, and much liked in the place, but of the present master of the hall, he could or would tell me nothing. The squire was a great scholar, but I gathered that he followed no sport, and was not a convivial soul like his predecessors. He had spent a mint of money on the house, but not many people went there. He, the landlord, had never been inside the grounds in the new master's time, though in the old days there had been hunt breakfasts on the lawn for the whole countryside, and mighty tenantry dinners. I went to bed with a clear picture in my mind of the man I was to interview on the morrow, a scholarly and autocratic recluse who collected treasures and beautified his dwelling.